The morning sun blazed mercilessly through the cracked blinds of Marcus Thompson's studio apartment, casting harsh shadows across a floor littered with empty beer bottles and unpaid bills. The 28-year-old Marine veteran sat hunched over his kitchen table, his callous fingers gripping a crumpled eviction notice that had arrived 3 days earlier. His bloodshot eyes, once sharp enough to spot IEDs from 100 yards in the Afghan desert, now struggled to focus on the words that sealed his fate. Final notice. Vacate premises within 72 hours. The apartment reeked of stale alcohol and despair. Pizza boxes formed a small mountain beside the overflowing trash can, while prescription bottles Prozac, Ambien, Tramadol sat untouched on the counter. Marcus had stopped taking his medications weeks ago, claiming they made him feel like a zombie. The only clean spot in the entire place was a small shrine on his dresser, 3 purple hearts, a bronze star, and a faded photograph of his unit. In Kandahar province, 12 men had posed for that picture. Only 7 came home alive. His cell phone buzzed relentlessly against the wooden table, vibrating like an angry hornet. The caller ID showed his ex-wife Jennifer's name for the 14th time that morning. Marcus knew exactly what she wanted: the child support payment that was now 3 weeks overdue. His 7-year-old daughter Sophie's school fees were due, and Jennifer's patience had finally run out. Each missed call felt like another round fired into his chest, another reminder of how spectacularly he'd failed at civilian life. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in around him as fragments of memory crashed through his consciousness like mortar rounds. The acrid smell of burning diesel fuel, the deafening crack of sniper fire, the weight of his best friend Danny's lifeless body in his arms. After that final convoy mission went wrong, Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push away the images. But the memories had become relentless predators, stalking him through every waking moment. A sharp knock on the door shattered the morning silence. Marcus's body instinctively dropped into a combat crouch, his hand reaching for the Kabar knife he kept strapped to his ankle, a habit that had never left Afghanistan. Through the peephole, he saw Mr. Hernandez, his landlord, holding what appeared to be legal documents. The stocky man's face wore the expression Marcus had seen too many times, a mixture of pity and barely contained anger. "Thompson, I know you're in there." Hernandez's voice carried through the thin door. "We need to talk, man. The eviction notice expired yesterday. I've got the sheriff's department on speed dial." Marcus's pulse quickened, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. The sound of authoritative voices always triggered something primal in his damaged psyche, a survival instinct forged in the crucible of urban warfare. He could feel the familiar sensation of his reality beginning to shift, the boundaries between past and present blurring like heat waves rising from desert sand. "Look, I get it. You served our country and all that," Hernandez continued, his tone growing impatient. "But I've got bills too, and you're 3 months behind. I need you out today, or I'm calling this in." Something inside Marcus's mind snapped like an overstretched rubber band. The apartment suddenly transformed into a forward operating base. Under siege, the knocking became the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors. Hernandez's voice morphed into the shouts of his commanding officer, ordering an immediate evacuation. The prescription bottles on the counter began to rattle. Though no earthquake was shaking the building, only the tremors running through Marcus's body. As his nervous system went into full combat mode, he yanked open the door with such force that Hernandez stumbled backward, his legal papers scattering across the hallway floor. Marcus's appearance was shocking. Shirtless, his muscular torso crisscrossed with scars from shrapnel and surgical procedures, his eyes wild with an emotion that went far beyond simple anger. The intricate tattoos covering his arms told the story of his military service unit insignias, fallen comrades' names, and coordinates of battles fought in a war most Americans had forgotten. "You want me out?" Marcus roared, his voice echoing through the narrow hallway. "You think this is about money? You think any of this matters when good men are dying for your freedom?" Hernandez raised his hands defensively, recognizing the dangerous edge in the veteran's voice. Other tenants began peering through their doorways, their faces filled with alarm. Mrs. Patterson from to be clutched her small dog closer to her chest, while the college students from the N unit quickly retreated and locked their door. Marcus pushed past his landlord and stalked toward the apartment complex's central courtyard, his bare feet slapping against the scorching concrete. The temperature had already climbed past 110 degrees, typical for a Phoenix July morning, but Marcus seemed oblivious to the heat. His mind was no longer in Arizona. It was transported to a dusty checkpoint outside Kandahar, where the temperature hit 120 degrees daily and every shadow could hide a sniper. "This is my perimeter," he shouted to no one in particular, his arms spread wide as he claimed the small courtyard as his tactical position. "I held this ground for 3 tours, and you want to evict me?" The Kabar knife appeared in his right hand as if materialized from thin air. Its 7-inch blade catching the morning sunlight, Marcus began pacing in tight circles, his military training evident in every movement despite his psychological breakdown. He was scanning for threats, checking sight lines, establishing fields of fire. All completely unconscious behaviors burned into his muscle memory. Through countless combat missions, residents scattered like startled birds, some retreating to their apartments, while others gathered at a safe distance to watch the spectacle unfold. Children pressed their faces against windows while their parents frantically dialed 911. The sound of multiple sirens began wailing in the distance. Growing closer with each passing second, Marcus raised the Purple Heart medals above his head, like a battle standard, his voice cracking with emotion as he addressed his invisible unit. "We don't leave anyone behind. That was the promise. But they left me behind, didn't they? Left me in this desert with nothing but memories and pills that don't work." The first police cruiser rounded the corner just as Marcus took his final stand, behind a large dumpster, using it as cover while he continued his passionate monologue to ghosts only he could see. His chest heaved with exertion and adrenaline, sweat streaming down his scarred torso as the full weight of his psychological crisis reached its breaking point. This wasn't just another veteran having a bad day. This was a warrior's soul crying out for help in the only language it knew, the brutal honesty of combat, where life and death decisions were made in heartbeats, and survival depended on never backing down from a fight. The emergency dispatch center buzzed with controlled chaos. As 911 calls flooded in from every direction, Amy Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran of Phoenix Emergency Services, had handled everything from gang shootouts to domestic terrorism threats. But the panic in the callers' voices made her blood run cold. Armed military veteran in complete breakdown, she announced over the radio, her fingers flying across the computer keyboard as she coordinated the response. Multiple weapons reported, civilians in immediate danger, requesting all available units to Desert View Apartments, 4800 McDowell Road. Officer Sarah Chan was finishing her morning coffee at a Circle K gas station when the call crackled through her patrol car's radio. The urgency in dispatch's voice made her abandon her breakfast and slammed the cruiser into drive. Her heart hammered against her ribcage as she weaved through Phoenix traffic, emergency lights painting the morning landscape in violent reds and blues. This wasn't her first veteran crisis call. She'd worked this beat for 5 years and knew the Desert View complex housed dozens of struggling former military personnel. The place was a powder keg of PTSD, unemployment, and addiction, held together by government assistance that barely covered rent. Her rookie partner, Jake Martinez, gripped the passenger door handle with white knuckles as Chen took corners at dangerous speeds. At 24, Martinez had 6 months on the force and had never drawn his weapon outside the training range. His academy instructors had warned about veteran crisis calls, how quickly they could escalate from welfare checks to officer-involved shootings. "What's our protocol here?" he asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. "Stay calm, establish perimeter, and pray nobody gets hurt," Chen replied grimly, her experienced eyes scanning the road ahead. She'd seen too many good cops get PTSD from these calls, forced to use lethal force against heroes who'd served their country with honor. The irony was sickening. Warriors who'd survived Taliban ambushes and roadside bombs, only to die on American concrete because their minds couldn't escape the battlefield. They rounded the final corner to find absolute pandemonium. Desert View Apartments looked like a war zone, with terrified residents scattered across the parking lot clutching children and pets. Some pointed frantically toward the central courtyard, while others held cell phones aloft, recording everything for social media. Chen's trained eye immediately identified the threat, a shirtless man with military tattoos, crouched behind a dumpster, wielding what appeared to be a combat knife while shouting at invisible enemies. "Jesus Christ," Martinez whispered, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "He's completely gone." Marcus Thompson was indeed lost in a psychological hell that no civilian could comprehend. The apartment complex had transformed in his fractured mind into forward operating base Chapman, where his unit had spent 18 months fighting Taliban insurgents. The dumpster became his bunker. The scattered residents morphed into potential hostiles, and every shadow concealed enemy snipers. His tactical training kicked in automatically. He positioned himself with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes, just as Sergeant Major Williams had drilled into him during urban warfare exercises. "We've got movement on the perimeter." Marcus screamed, his voice hoarse from shouting, "Request immediate air support. Taliban fighters in the wire." His scarred chest heaved with exertion as he brandished the Kabar knife, its blade reflecting the harsh Arizona sun like a mirror to the gathering crowd of officers. He appeared to be a dangerous psychotic. To Marcus, he was the last line of defense between American lives and enemy combatants. Chen keyed her radio with practiced efficiency. "Unit 47 on scene. We have one adult male, approximately 30 years old, armed with an edged weapon, exhibiting signs of severe psychological distress. Appears to be military veteran experiencing PTSD episode, requesting supervisor, paramedics, and..." She paused, watching Marcus's tactical movements. "Requesting K9 unit for possible apprehension. More patrol cars arrived by the minute. There." Occupants spreading out in a wide circle around the courtyard. Sergeant Williams, a 20-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, took command of the scene. He'd served tours in Iraq himself and recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't criminal behavior. This was a warrior's mind trapped in a battle that ended years ago, but never truly stopped. Nobody shoots unless he charges with that knife. Williams ordered over the tactical frequency. This man earned those scars defending our freedom. We're going to get him help, not put him in a body bag. His voice carried the authority of experience and the compassion of someone who understood the invisible wounds of war. The temperature climbed steadily toward 115 degrees, typical for July in Phoenix. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt like liquid mercury, and several officers loosened their tactical vests to prevent heat exhaustion. But Marcus seemed oblivious to the scorching conditions, his body conditioned by years of desert warfare where temperatures routinely exceeded 1 to 0 degrees. Sweat poured down his scarred torso, but his grip on the knife never wavered. Dr. Emily Foster, the department's crisis negotiator, arrived in an unmarked sedan and immediately began assessing the situation. She'd handled dozens of veteran crisis calls, but Marcus's case was more severe than most. "He's completely dissociated," she told Williams after observing for several minutes. "His reality is Afghanistan, not Arizona. Traditional negotiation techniques won't work here." A news helicopter circled overhead, its rotors beating a rhythmic pattern that only made Marcus more agitated. "Incoming bird," he shouted, diving for better cover. Could be enemy transport. All units maintained firing positions. The irony wasn't lost on the veteran officers. The media attention was actually making their job harder by feeding into Marcus's military delusions. Chen wiped sweat from her forehead and checked her watch. They'd been on scene for 27 minutes, and the situation showed no signs of de-escalating. More residents gathered at the perimeter, their smartphones capturing every moment for immediate upload to social media. Within hours, this would be national news. Another story about a dangerous veteran threatening innocent civilians. The narrative would write itself, and Marcus would become just another statistic in America's ongoing struggle with military mental health. "Where's that K9 unit?" Williams demanded over the radio. "We need options here before this gets any worse." In the distance, the distinctive sound of a police dog barking could be heard approaching. K9 officer Mike Rodriguez was en route with his German Shepherd partner Rex, unaware that they were about to participate in a moment that would fundamentally change how law enforcement responds to veteran crises. The stage was set for an encounter that would either end in tragedy or become the most remarkable example of interspecies empathy in police history. The desert sun continued its relentless assault on everyone present, but Marcus Thompson remained focused on his imaginary battlefield, completely unaware that his real war was about to take an extraordinary turn. The rumble of K9 officer Mike Rodriguez's patrol unit cut through the desert heat, like thunder announcing an approaching storm. Behind the reinforced partition, Rex, a magnificent 90-pound German Shepherd with coal-black markings and intelligent amber eyes, sat with military precision, his muscular frame coiled like a loaded spring. The 4-year-old dog possessed an arrest record that would make seasoned detectives envious. 43 successful apprehensions, 12 drug busts totaling over $2 million in seized narcotics, and 0 officer injuries during his deployments. Rex was quite literally a weapon with fur, trained to neutralize threats with surgical efficiency. Rodriguez himself was a steady and controlled intensity. At 36, the former Army medic had transitioned from battlefield medicine to law enforcement, bringing with him an understanding of violence that few civilian officers possessed. His weathered hands bore scars from improvised explosive devices in Mosul, and his dark eyes held the steady gaze of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst, and somehow maintained faith in its redemption. The partnership between Rodriguez and Rex wasn't just professional, it was forged in the understanding that sometimes overwhelming force applied with precision could save more lives than hours of negotiation. As they approached Desert View Apartments, Rodriguez could see the tactical nightmare unfolding before them. 15 patrol cars formed a loose perimeter around the complex, their red and blue lights creating a disorienting strobe effect in the blazing noon sun. Officers crouched behind vehicle doors with weapons drawn, their body armor darkened with sweat stains despite the relatively short duration of the standoff. The news helicopter continued its lazy circles overhead, its rotor wash stirring up dust clouds that reduced visibility and added another layer of chaos to an already volatile situation. Unit K9-7 on scene, Rodriguez announced over the radio, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Rex's ears perked forward at the familiar sound of tactical communications, his body language shifting from travel mode to work mode in an instant. The dog's nostrils flared as he processed the complex scent profile surrounding them: human fear, gunpowder residue from holstered weapons, the metallic tang of blood from minor injuries sustained during the initial evacuation, and something that made his hackles rise slightly. Sergeant Williams jogged over to brief the K9 team, his face grim with the weight of command decisions. "We've got Marcus Thompson, 28-year-old Marine veteran, 3 tours in Afghanistan. He's armed with a combat knife and completely dissociated, thinks he's back in a war zone." Dr. Foster tried verbal de-escalation for the past hour, with 0 success. He's positioned behind that dumpster with excellent tactical advantages. One slip, and this becomes a bloodbath. Rodriguez studied the scene with professional detachment, his medic training automatically cataloging potential casualties. At least 30 civilians remained in the area despite evacuation attempts, their morbid curiosity overriding common sense. Children pressed against apartment windows while parents live-streamed the drama on social media platforms. If Rex's deployment went wrong, if Mark is charged with that knife, the resulting officer-involved shooting would traumatize dozens of witnesses and destroy multiple careers. "What's his military background?" Rodriguez asked, already formulating tactical approaches in his mind. Explosive ordnance disposal specialist, Bronze Star recipient, Purple Heart with 3 clusters, lost his best friend to an IED during his final deployment. Classic PTSD presentation, but more severe than most. Williams paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mike, I need you to understand this man is a genuine American hero having the worst day of his life. If we can avoid using lethal force, understood, Sergeant. Rex and I will handle this." Rodriguez's confidence wasn't misplaced. His German Shepherd partner had never failed to subdue a suspect, and the dogs by force of 238 pounds per square inch could incapacitate even the most determined fighter within seconds. More importantly, Rex's speed and agility allowed him to engage threats before they could harm officers, making him the perfect solution for this standoff. Behind the dumpster, Marcus Thompson continued his psychological descent into combat hell. The apartment complex had become indistinguishable from forward operating base Chapman, complete with enemy contacts and incoming mortars. His combat knife, a 7-inch Kabar with a leather-wrapped handle, had tasted Taliban blood in 17 confirmed kills during close quarters combat. To Marcus, it represented the difference between life and death, between protecting his brothers in arms and watching them die in the Afghan dust. Contact front. Multiple hostiles approaching the perimeter. Marcus screamed, his voice cracking with exhaustion and dehydration. The approaching K9 unit sounded like enemy armor to his damaged psyche, its diesel engine rumbling like the insurgent vehicles that had haunted his nightmares for 3 years. "Sergeant Rodriguez, we need immediate extraction. Friendlies are danger close." The irony was almost cosmic. Marcus was calling for Sergeant Rodriguez, while the real Rodriguez prepared to deploy against him. But Marcus's Rodriguez existed only in his fractured memories, a composite of every good leader he'd served under in the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan. In his mind, salvation was always just one radio call away, one helicopter ride from safety, one more mission before going home to a country that would understand his sacrifice. Rodriguez approached the deployment zone with Rex on a tactical leash, the specialized restraint designed to release instantly when lethal force became necessary. The German Shepherd's transformation was remarkable. To witness his friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of a predator preparing to hunt. Every muscle in the dog's body was coiled for explosive action, his breathing controlled and steady despite the 115-degree heat. Rex, heel, Rodriguez commanded softly, and the dog fell into perfect position beside his handler's left leg. They moved with the synchronized precision of partners who trained together for thousands of hours, each anticipating the other's movements through subtle body language cues invisible to casual observer. First, the crowd of officers parted to create a clear path to Marcus's position. Dr. Foster made one final attempt at verbal de-escalation. Marcus, my name is Dr. Foster. I work with veterans who've served overseas. I know you're seeing things that aren't really here. Can you tell me what year it is? It's 2021, ma'am, Marcus shouted back, his temporal displacement complete. We're under heavy fire from Taliban positions. Request permission to engage hostile targets. Rodriguez and Rex reached their final position 30 yards from Marcus's improvised bunker with a clear approach route. The German Shepherd's amber eyes locked onto their target with laser focus, his body language communicating readiness to his handler through the tactical leash. This was the moment of truth, the point where words ended and action began. All units, prepare for K-9 deployment, Williams announced over the radio. Lethal force authorized if the suspect charges with a weapon. Rodriguez's finger hovered over the leash release mechanism as Rex's muscles bunched for the attack. Neither man nor dog could possibly predict that they were about to witness something that would revolutionize police K-9 training programs across the nation and prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon in law enforcement's arsenal isn't force, it's understanding. The moment before chaos has a quality all its own, a crystalline stillness, where time seems suspended between heartbeats, where the weight of impending violence hangs in the air, like smoke from a distant fire. Rodriguez felt it as his finger tightened on Rex's tactical leash release, the familiar pre-action calm that had kept him alive through 3 deployments in Iraq. Rex sensed it too. His powerful hindquarters coiled like compressed steel springs, ready to explode into deadly motion at his handler's command. 15 officers held their collective breath, weapons trained on Marcus Thompson's position, knowing that the next 30 seconds would determine whether this standoff ended in a successful arrest or a coroner's report. Then something extraordinary happened that would be analyzed in police academies for decades to come. Rex's entire demeanor shifted in a way that Rodriguez had never witnessed in 4 years of partnership. The German Shepherd's aggressive posture, ears pinned back, lips slightly curled, eyes locked on target, transformed into something completely unexpected. His ears snapped forward to full alert position, not with predatory focus, but with what could only be described as recognition. The low growl rumbling in his chest died away, replaced by a soft whimpering sound that Rodriguez had never heard from his battle-hardened partner. What the hell? Rodriguez muttered under his breath, feeling Rex's body language changed through the tactical leash. The dog's hackles, which had been raised in preparation for combat, slowly settled back to normal. Even more puzzling, Rex's tail, previously tucked tight against his body in attack mode, began a tentative, almost uncertain wag. The German Shepherd's extraordinary olfactory system was processing information invisible to every human present. Rex's 300 million scent receptors were analyzing a complex chemical signature that told a story of brotherhood, sacrifice, and shared trauma. He detected the lingering traces of military-issue gun oil that had soaked into Marcus's skin during countless weapons cleanings, the unmistakable scent of desert sand, somehow still clinging to the veteran's hair and clothing 3 years after his last deployment. Most importantly, Rex's sensitive nose picked up the distinctive pheromone markers that marked Marcus as a fellow warrior, chemical signatures produced by extreme stress, hypervigilance, and the unique neurological patterns of combat veterans. But there was something else. something that triggered a recognition protocol deeper than training could account for. Rex detected trace elements of explosives, not fresh ordnance, but the microscopic residue that becomes permanently embedded in the skin and clothing of explosive ordnance disposal specialists. The same chemical signature that had surrounded Rex during his early training at Lackland Air Force Base, where he'd worked alongside military bomb disposal teams. Before his transfer to civilian law enforcement, Marcus, still lost in his Afghanistan flashback, noticed the approaching dog with laser focus. His combat-trained eyes immediately assessed the threat: a German Shepherd, approximately 90 pounds, moving with military precision. But something about the animal's approach triggered a different set of memories, ones buried beneath the trauma and medication-induced fog that had clouded his mind for months. "Military working dog," Marcus whispered, his voice suddenly losing its manic edge. "That's a military working dog approaching our position." The recognition was mutual and instantaneous. Rex had spent his puppyhood at Lackland Air Force Base, the Department of Defense's primary training facility for military working dogs. Though ultimately disqualified from overseas deployment due to a minor hearing deficiency, Rex had absorbed the protocols, the scents, and the behavioral patterns of military service during his formative months. Every cell in his body had been programmed to recognize and protect American service members, not to attack them. Rodriguez felt the change through the leash before he could see it. Rex's pulling motion shifted from aggressive advance to something entirely different, a deliberate, careful approach that spoke of concern rather than predation. The dog's body language transformed from that of a weapon, preparing to engage, to that of a fellow soldier recognizing someone in distress. "Rex, what are you doing?" Rodriguez demanded, confusion replacing his tactical certainty. For years of partnership, through dozens of high-stress deployments, Rex had never hesitated, never shown anything but absolute focus on target elimination. This behavior was unprecedented, and in a tactical situation, unprecedented meant dangerous. The German Shepherd began pulling toward Marcus with increasing urgency, but his movement pattern was all wrong for an attack sequence. Instead of the explosive sprint and takedown that his training demanded, Rex approached with what could only be described as canine empathy, his head lowered in a submissive posture, his ears forward in concerned attention, his entire demeanor radiating a desire to help rather than harm. Marcus watched the dog's approach with growing clarity, his PTSD-induced hallucinations flickering like a television with poor reception. For brief moments, the apartment complex courtyard returned to focus: the Arizona heat, the circle of police officers, the realization that he was holding a knife and covered in sweat. But then the memories would surge back. Kandahar province, the weight of his explosive ordnance disposal gear, the constant threat of IEDs, and most powerfully, the memory of Gunnar. Sergeant First Class Gunnar had been a Belgian Malinois assigned to Marcus's EOD unit during his final deployment. The dog had saved countless lives by detecting roadside bombs, his nose capable of identifying explosive compounds at concentrations measured in parts per billion. Gunnar had been more than a military asset, he'd been Marcus's closest companion. During the longest, darkest months of the war, when the IED finally got them both, Gunnar had died instantly, sparing him the agony that Marcus carried home in his chest and left leg. "Gunnar," Marcus called out tentatively, his voice cracking with emotion. "That you, boy?" Rex's whimpering intensified, his amber eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that transcended species barriers. The German Shepherd could sense the veteran's emotional pain as clearly as he could smell the explosive residue on his skin. Every instinct in the dog's military-trained psyche was screaming that this human was pack, was family, was someone to be protected rather than subdued. Dr. Foster, observing from the police perimeter, recognized the significance of what was unfolding. "Officer Rodriguez," she called over the radio, "I need you to let the dog approach naturally. Don't force the engagement. Something remarkable is happening here." Rodriguez found himself in uncharted territory. His training, his experience, his tactical protocols, none of them had prepared him for a K-9 partner who refused to engage a suspect. Yet something in Rex's behavior convinced him to trust his four-legged partner's judgment. Against every instinct screaming at him to maintain control of the situation, Rodriguez allowed Rex to dictate the approach. The German Shepherd moved forward with purpose now, his powerful legs carrying him across the scorching asphalt toward Marcus's position behind the dumpster. But this wasn't the charge of a police dog apprehending a suspect. This was the careful approach of one warrior reaching out to another, offering comfort to a brother in arms who had lost his way home from the battlefield. Don Marcus lowered his knife slightly as Rex drew closer, his fragmented psyche struggling to process what was happening. The approaching dog represented something his traumatized mind desperately needed: unconditional acceptance, non-judgmental presence, and the kind of loyalty that only military units understood. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Thompson wasn't alone with his demons. The Phoenix desert heat shimmered off the asphalt like liquid mercury as 15 armed officers held their breath, watching an extraordinary drama unfold that would be replayed on body cameras and analyzed in police academies for generations to come. Sergeant Williams's voice crackled through the radio with deadly authority. All units. Suspect appears to be reaching for secondary weapon. K9 deploying now. Take him down. Rodriguez's finger hovered over the tactical leash release, his training warring with his instincts as Rex continued his inexplicable approach toward Marcus Thompson. Every protocol demanded immediate deployment. The suspect was armed, potentially reaching for another weapon, a position to cause maximum casualties if he charged the police perimeter. But something in Rex's behavior, something Rodriguez had never witnessed in 4 years of partnership, made him hesitate for one crucial heartbeat. Deploy the dog. That's a direct order, Williams commanded, his voice tight with the stress of command responsibility. Behind him, news helicopters circled like mechanical vultures, their cameras capturing every moment for immediate broadcast to millions of viewers. Who would judge every decision made in these split seconds of crisis? Rodriguez's thumb moved to the release mechanism as Rex reached the edge of Marcus's defensive position. The German Shepherd was now within striking distance of the knife-wielding veteran, close enough that any aggressive movement could result in serious injury or death. This was the moment of maximum danger, the point where hesitation could cost lives and where split-second decisions would be scrutinized by internal affairs investigators, civil rights lawyers, and Monday morning quarterbacks who had never faced a life-or-death situation. Then Rex did something that defied 4 years of intensive training, thousands of hours of conditioning, and every instinct bred into his German Shepherd genetics. Instead of launching into the explosive takedown maneuver that had successfully neutralized 43 previous suspects, Rex approached Marcus with the gentle deliberation of a therapy dog visiting a hospital patient. His powerful jaws, capable of exerting the 138 pounds of crushing force, remained relaxed and open. His muscular body, designed for high-speed pursuit and violent confrontation, moved with the careful precision of someone approaching a wounded animal. Marcus, still trapped in his PTSD-induced flashback, watched the approaching dog with dawning recognition. The German Shepherd's movement pattern triggered a flood of memories from his deployments. Not the traumatic ones that usually dominated his nightmares, but the rare moments of comfort and companionship that had sustained him through the darkest periods of the war. Easy, boy, Marcus whispered, his voice losing the manic edge that had characterized his breakdown. I know you're just doing your job. The Kabar knife, which had been brandished like a sword against imaginary enemies, slowly lowered as Rex drew closer. Something about the dog's approach bypassed the veteran's conscious defenses and spoke directly to the part of his soul that remembered what it meant to trust. Rex reached the final defeat of distance and performed an action that would be studied by animal behaviorists, military psychologists, and law enforcement trainers for decades. Instead of executing the tackle-and-bite maneuver that his training demanded, the German Shepherd sat down directly in front of Marcus Thompson, looked up into the veteran's tortured eyes, and placed his massive head against the man's trembling leg. The silence that followed was deafening. 15 police officers lowered their weapons slightly, their minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. Dr. Foster dropped her negotiation handbook, her professional training inadequate to explain the therapeutic intervention unfolding. Before her eyes, Rodriguez stood frozen with his hand on the leash release, watching his partner perform an act of empathy that transcended species boundaries. Marcus felt the weight of Rex's head against his leg, and something inside his damaged psyche cracked open like a dam bursting. 3 years of suppressed grief, survivor's guilt, and self-destructive anger came pouring out in a torrent of emotion that shook his entire body. The Kabar knife slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered onto the asphalt as he collapsed to his knees beside the German Shepherd. Gunner, Marcus sobbed, his arms wrapping around Rex's muscular neck. I'm so sorry, boy. I should have seen that IED. I should have protected you better." The words came in broken fragments between gasping breaths as years of buried trauma finally found expression. Rex remained perfectly still, his warm body providing an anchor point for Marcus's shattered consciousness. The German Shepherd's behavior was unprecedented in the annals of police K-9 deployment, but it made perfect sense. From a deeper perspective, Rex had recognized something in Marcus that no human observer could detect: the scent signature of a fellow warrior, the pheromone markers of someone who had served alongside military working dogs, the chemical traces of explosives that marked him as an EOD specialist who had risked his life daily to protect his brothers in arms. More importantly, Rex sensed the profound grief radiating from Marcus like heat from a forge. The dog's military training hadn't eliminated his capacity for empathy, it had refined it, teaching him to distinguish between genuine threats and wounded allies. In Marcus Thompson, Rex recognized not an enemy to be subdued, but a pack member who had lost his way and needed guidance home. Officer Chan approached slowly, her weapon holstered, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the most powerful display of interspecies compassion she had ever encountered. "Dispatch, we need paramedics for wellness check, not trauma response," she radioed quietly. "Situation is resolved through non-traditional means." The crowd of civilians who had gathered to watch what they expected to be a violent confrontation found themselves witnessing something far more profound. Children pressed against apartment windows pointed at the man and dog, instinctively understanding the love and healing they were seeing. Adults who had been live streaming the drama for social media entertainment slowly lowered their phones, recognizing that they were observing something sacred. Marcus continued to sob into Rex's fur, his words becoming clearer as the psychological fog began to lift. "He saved so many lives, boy. Gunnar saved so many lives, and I couldn't save him. I've been carrying that weight for 3 years, and I can't carry it anymore." Rex's tail began a slow, gentle wag, not the aggressive flag of a working dog completing a successful apprehension, but the compassionate response of one soul comforting another. The German Shepherd's presence was providing something that months of therapy, prescription medications, and support groups had failed to deliver: unconditional acceptance and the understanding that some wounds can only be healed through connection with another being who has walked the same dark paths. Rodriguez finally released the tactical leash and approached his partner, his own eyes moist as he realized he was witnessing a miracle disguised as a police call. Rex had just demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful weapon in law enforcement's arsenal isn't force or intimidation, it's compassion delivered at exactly the right moment, by exactly the right individual, even if that individual happens to have 4 legs and a tail. The Desert View Apartments courtyard had transformed from a tactical battlefield into something resembling a field hospital triage unit, with the profound silence broken only by Marcus Thompson's ragged breathing and the distant hum of news helicopters circling overhead like electronic buzzards. Rex remained motionless against the veteran's leg, his amber eyes never leaving Marcus's face as tears carved clean tracks. Through 3 days of accumulated grime and despair, the German Shepherd's presence had accomplished what months of VA therapy sessions, prescription cocktails, and well-meaning family interventions had failed to achieve. It had given Marcus permission to finally grieve. Officer Rodriguez approached slowly, his tactical boots crunching softly on the superheated asphalt as he tried to process what his K-9 partner had just demonstrated. In 4 years of partnership, through drug raids, armed robberies, and domestic violence calls, Rex had never deviated from his training protocols. The dog was a precision instrument, calibrated for maximum efficiency in suspect apprehension. Yet here he sat, providing comfort to a man he should have neutralized, displaying an emotional intelligence that transcended anything taught at police academy. "Talk to me, Marcus," Rodriguez said gently, settling into a crouch beside the broken veteran. His voice carried the authority of law enforcement, but tempered with the compassion of someone who understood the invisible wounds of combat. "Tell me about your dog." Marcus's response came in fractured whispers, his voice barely audible above the desert wind. Gunnar he was a Belgian Malinois, military working dog 347. We served together for 18 months in Kandahar province. His fingers worked methodically through Rex's thick fur, the repetitive motion seeming to anchor him to the present moment. He could detect explosives from 100 meters away. Saved our convoy 12 times, maybe more. I lost count after the first year. Dr. Foster had approached the group with careful steps, her crisis negotiation training giving way to simple human curiosity about the therapeutic breakthrough unfolding before her eyes. She'd handled hundreds of veteran crisis calls, but she'd never witnessed anything like Rex's instinctive intervention. The German Shepherd had somehow bypassed every defensive mechanism that Marcus had constructed around his trauma and reached directly into the core of his pain. "What happened to Gunnar?" she asked softly, her voice carrying the practiced gentleness of someone accustomed to walking through emotional minefields. Marcus's body shuddered as if the question had physically struck him. Rex seemed to sense the surge of anguish and pressed closer, his warm presence providing a buffer against the approaching storm of memory. Route clearance mission, October 15, 2021. We were checking a suspected IED placement along Highway 1. Gunnar alerted on something buried in the roadway, but the device was bigger than we thought. Remote detonated. His voice cracked like breaking glass. The blast threw me 30 feet. Gunnar took the worst of it. He died trying to shield me from the shrapnel. Rodriguez felt his own eyes burning as he listened to Marcus's story. As a former Army medic, he'd seen enough combat casualties to understand the survivor's guilt that could destroy a man's soul more effectively than any physical wound. But he'd also noticed something that might explain Rex's unprecedented behavior during the standoff. "Marcus, where exactly did you serve? What base were you stationed at?" Rodriguez asked, a suspicion forming in his mind. "Forward Operating Base Chapman, mostly. But we did a lot of training rotations through different facilities. Spent 6 weeks at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, working with the military working DOD program. They were developing new detection protocols for IEDs, and they needed experienced EOD specialists to help with the training scenarios." The pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place for Rodriguez like tumblers in a lock. He turned to look at Rex with new understanding, seeing his partner not just as a police K-9, but as a bridge between two different worlds of service. Rex was trained at Lackland, Rodriguez said slowly. He was originally destined for military deployment before a hearing deficiency disqualified him from overseas service. Marcus looked up sharply, his red-rimmed eyes focusing on Rex with sudden intensity. "You were military?" he asked the dog, his voice filled with wonder. That's why you recognized me." Rex's tail began a slow, deliberate wag, and for the first time since the crisis began, something resembling a smile crossed Marcus's face. The German Shepherd had retained more than just basic obedience from his military training. He'd absorbed the brotherhood, the loyalty, the unbreakable bond that connected all who had served in uniform, regardless of species. Officer Chan had been documenting the entire interaction for her incident report, but she found herself setting aside her notebook as she watched the connection deepen between man and dog. "It's like they're having a conversation," she murmured to Sergeant Williams, who nodded grimly as he tried to imagine explaining this incident to the department brass. "In a way, they are," Dr. Foster replied, her professional fascination overriding her surprise. "Rex is responding to chemical markers that indicate military service-specific sense from weapons, maintenance, explosives exposure, even the unique stress hormones produced by combat veterans. But more than that, he's recognizing behavioral patterns, body language, the way Marcus carries himself despite his current crisis." Marcus continued speaking to Rex as if the dog could understand every word, and perhaps in some ways, he could. Military working dogs were selected and trained for their ability to read human emotions, to anticipate their handlers' needs, to form bonds that could survive the chaos of combat zones. Rex had been bred for that kind of connection, even if his career path had taken an unexpected turn into civilian law enforcement. "You know what it's like, don't you, boy?" Marcus whispered, his hand finding the spot behind Rex's ear that made the dog's eyes close in contentment. "The training, the discipline, the way they teach you to be ready for anything. But they don't teach you how to handle losing your partner. They don't prepare you for the nightmares, or the guilt, or the way civilian life feels like wearing clothes that don't fit." The crowd of officers and civilians who had gathered to witness what they expected to be a violent confrontation now found themselves observing something far more profound, a demonstration of healing that transcended the boundaries between human and animal, between past and present, between the trauma of war and the possibility of peace. Rodriguez made a decision that would alter the trajectory of his career and revolutionize K-9 training protocols across the country. Marcus, He said quietly, "I think Rex would like to visit you at the hospital. Would that be okay with you?" The veteran's nod was barely perceptible, but it carried the weight of hope that had been absent from his life for 3 long years. Rex seemed to understand the arrangement instinctively, his body language shifting from crisis intervention mode to something that looked remarkably like a therapy dog, preparing for his next assignment. As paramedics finally approached to provide medical evaluation, Rex maintained his position beside Marcus, having apparently appointed himself as the veteran's personal guardian until proper care could be established. The German Shepherd had just redefined what it meant to serve and protect, proving that sometimes the most effective law enforcement tool isn't a weapon or restraint. It's compassion delivered by the right individual at exactly the right moment. The Phoenix Veterans Affairs Medical Center emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as Marcus Thompson was wheeled through the automatic doors, his vital signs finally stable for the first time in weeks. Beside the gurney, Rex padded along with military precision, his amber eyes never leaving his self-appointed charge despite the unfamiliar hospital environment. Paramedic Linda Foster had worked countless psychiatric emergencies, but she'd never seen a patient's condition improve so dramatically during transport. Marcus's blood pressure had normalized, his breathing had steadied, and most remarkably, he'd maintained coherent conversation throughout the 15-minute ambulance ride. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Sarah Martinez told Officer Rodriguez as they watched Marcus being transferred to a psychiatric evaluation room. The attending physician had 23 years of experience treating combat veterans, but Rex's therapeutic intervention defied every protocol in her medical training. His cortisol levels have dropped 40% since that dog made contact. Whatever happened out there, it triggered a neurochemical response that months of conventional therapy couldn't achieve. Rodriguez stood beside Rex in the hospital corridor, both of them watching through the observation window as Marcus answered questions from the psychiatric team. The veteran's transformation was remarkable. The wild-eyed, knife-wielding man from the apartment complex had been replaced by someone who, while clearly still struggling, was engaging rationally with medical professionals for the first time in months. "I need to understand what just happened," Rodriguez said to Dr. Foster, who had accompanied them to document the incident for her crisis intervention research. "Rex has never done anything like this, and for years of partnership, he's been a weapon, not a therapist. Today he became something I didn't know was possible." Dr. Foster consulted her hastily scribbled notes, her professional curiosity warring with her amazement at what she'd witnessed. "Your dog demonstrated what we call emotional contagion recognition, the ability to identify and respond to specific psychological states in humans. But Rex went beyond recognition into active intervention. He essentially performed psychological first aid without any formal training." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's voice calling from the evaluation room, "Where's Rex? I need to know he's okay." The request was delivered with the clarity of someone whose mental fog was beginning to lift, whose connection to reality was being restored through the anchor of canine companionship. Rodriguez entered the room with Rex at his heel, and the immediate change in Marcus's demeanor was visible to everyone present. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, and his hands stopped their nervous trembling as the German Shepherd approached his bedside. Rex, displaying the situational awareness that had made him exceptional in law enforcement, immediately adapted his behavior to the medical environment. No jumping, no excessive enthusiasm, just the steady presence of a trained professional providing comfort. "Officer Rodriguez," Marcus said, his voice stronger than it had been in months, "I need you to know that Rex saved my life today, not just from the immediate crisis, but from something much deeper. I've been drowning for 3 years, and I finally found something to hold onto." The room fell silent as medical staff witnessed something rarely seen in veteran psychiatric care: genuine hope, replacing despair in real time. Dr. Martinez made a note to contact the hospital's therapy dog coordinator, recognizing that Rex had just demonstrated capabilities that could revolutionize their treatment protocols. Rodriguez found himself at a crossroads that would define the remainder of his career. His instincts as a law enforcement officer told him to follow protocol, file his report, and return Rex to regular patrol duties. But his experience as a former Army medic, combined with what he'd witnessed during the standoff, suggested a different path entirely. "Marcus," Rodriguez said carefully, "what if I told you that Rex and I could visit you during your recovery, not as police officers, But as support team members, the veteran's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. But before he could respond, Dr. Martinez interjected with the practical concerns of medical administration. Officer Rodriguez, our hospital has strict policies about non-medical animals in patient care areas. Unless Rex is a certified therapy dog, we can't authorize regular visits. Then let's get him certified, Rodriguez replied without hesitation. If Rex can do what he did today consistently, imagine how many veterans we could help. This isn't about bending rules, this is about saving lives. Dr. Foster leaned forward, her research instincts fully engaged. Officer Rodriguez, what you're proposing could be groundbreaking. A police K-9 with dual training in suspect apprehension and veteran crisis intervention? We could develop entirely new protocols for law enforcement response to military mental health emergencies. Over the next 3 hours, as Marcus underwent comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, Rodriguez found himself at the center of an impromptu brainstorming session. That included hospital administrators, police supervisors, and veteran services coordinators. Rex sat patiently throughout the discussions, occasionally glancing toward Marcus's room as if monitoring his charge's condition. The solution that emerged was as innovative as it was logical. Rex would undergo specialized training to become the first dual-certified police K-9 and veteran crisis support animal in Arizona. The program would be developed jointly by the Phoenix Police Department, the VA Medical Center, and Arizona State University's Animal Behavior Research Program. Marcus, once stabilized and committed to his recovery, would serve as Rex's primary training partner, helping to develop protocols that could be replicated nationwide. This could change everything, Captain Williams said during a conference call with department brass. Instead of seeing veteran crisis calls as potential disasters, we could see them as opportunities for healing. Rex proved today that sometimes the best way to de-escalate a situation is through compassion, not force. By evening, Marcus had been admitted to the hospital's voluntary psychiatric program with Rex authorized as his primary therapy support animal. The veteran's transformation continued throughout the day. His appetite returned, his sleep improved, and most importantly, he began engaging with treatment providers about his PTSD for the first time since returning from Afghanistan. Rodriguez completed his incident report at 11:47 p.m., struggling to find official language adequate to describe Rex's unprecedented intervention. His final paragraph would become required reading at police academies across the Southwest. K-9 Rex demonstrated that the most powerful tool in law enforcement is not force, but the ability to recognize when force is not the answer. Today, my partner chose healing over harm, and in doing so, he may have saved not just one veteran's life, but potentially thousands of others who will benefit from the protocols we develop. Based on his instinctive compassion, as Rodriguez prepared to leave the hospital, he found Marcus sitting up in bed with Rex beside him, both of them looking out the window at the Phoenix skyline. For the first time in years, the veteran was making plans for tomorrow instead of reliving yesterday's trauma. "Thank you," Marcus said simply as Rodriguez approached. "Both of you. I finally remember what it feels like to have hope." Rex's tail wagged slowly, and Rodriguez realized that his four-legged partner had just taught him the most important lesson of his career. Sometimes the strongest among us are called not to fight, but to heal. 8 months after the Desert View Apartments incident, Marcus Thompson stood at the podium of the National Law Enforcement Training Conference in Las Vegas, his voice steady and confident as he addressed an audience of 1,200 police officers, veterans advocates, and mental health professionals from across North America. The man, who had once wielded a combat knife in a PTSD-induced breakdown, now wore a crisp navy suit and spoke with the authority of someone who had not only survived his demons, but had transformed them into a mission of healing. Beside him, Rex sat at perfect attention, wearing a specialized vest that read Veteran Crisis Response K-9 in bold letters across his muscular frame. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his eyes scanning the packed auditorium. 18 months ago, I was a statistic waiting to happen, another veteran casualty, another tragedy that would make headlines for 24 hours before being forgotten. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as proof that sometimes the most broken among us can become the strongest advocates for change. The audience, initially skeptical about hearing from a civilian at a law enforcement conference, had been gradually won over during Marcus's 40-minute presentation. Heat shared statistics that made seasoned officers uncomfortable. 22 veterans died by suicide daily. Veteran homelessness had increased 40% in the past 5 years. As police responses to veteran mental health crises resulted in fatalities 60% more often than similar calls involving civilians. But Marcus hadn't come to Las Vegas to recite depressing numbers. He'd come to present a solution that was already saving lives across the Southwest. Officer Rodriguez, now promoted to sergeant and director of the Arizona Veteran Crisis Response Unit, approached the microphone as Marcus concluded his opening remarks. The partnership between the former EOD specialist and the police K-9 handler had evolved into something unprecedented in law enforcement, a joint civilian police initiative that treated veteran mental health emergencies as medical crises rather than criminal incidents. The Phoenix model, Rodriguez explained to the rapt audience, has achieved a 93% success rate in de-escalating veteran crisis situations without use of force. More importantly, 78% of veterans contacted through our program have successfully engaged with long-term mental health services. We're not just preventing tragedies, we're creating pathways to healing. Rex, now certified as the nation's first dual-purpose police K-9 and veteran crisis intervention specialty, Saint had become the prototype for a new generation of law enforcement animals. His training regimen, developed through months of collaboration between Marcus, Rodriguez, and animal behavior specialists at Arizona State University, focus on scent recognition of combat stress markers, de-escalation techniques, and therapeutic presence protocols. The German Shepherd could identify veterans in crisis through chemical signatures invisible to humans, then provide immediate emotional support while human responders coordinated medical intervention. In the audience, Captain Sarah Williams of the Denver Police Department furiously scribbled notes as she calculated the budgetary requirements for implementing similar programs in Colorado. Her department had experienced 3 veteran-related officer-involved shootings in the past year, each one traumatizing the officers involved and devastating the families of veterans who had survived combat overseas only to die on American streets during mental health crises. The key insight, Marcus continued, clicking to a slide showing Rex during a training exercise, is that military working dogs like Rex retain their ability to recognize fellow service members long after their active duty ends. They're programmed to protect the pack, and in their minds, veterans remain pack members for life. We're simply teaching them to expand their protection protocols beyond physical threats to include psychological ones. The presentation included video footage from recent deployments that left few dry eyes in the auditorium. A homeless Marine veteran in Tucson, convinced that Taliban fighters were pursuing him through downtown alleys, had been peacefully guided to medical care by Rex and Rodriguez after a 3-hour standoff with SWAT teams had failed. An Army helicopter pilot in Flagstaff, barricaded in her apartment with a loaded shotgun, had surrendered her weapon within minutes of Rex's arrival and was now successfully managing her PTSD through intensive therapy. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, who has since been promoted to Director of Crisis Intervention Research for the Arizona Department of Public Safety, presented the scientific data supporting the program's expansion. Canine-assisted crisis intervention produces measurable neurochemical changes in veterans experiencing PTSD episodes, she explained, displaying brain scan comparisons on the projection screen. Cortisol levels drop an average of 45% within 10 minutes of contact with trained crisis response dogs. More significantly, we're seeing increased production of oxytocin and dopamine, the neurochemicals associated with trust, bonding, and emotional regulation. The program's success had attracted national attention. The Department of Veterans Affairs had allocated $12 million to fund similar initiatives in 24 cities across the United States. Major police departments from Seattle to Miami were sending officers and K-9 teams to Phoenix for specialized training. Most remarkably, veteran suicide rates in areas served by crisis response K-9 teams had decreased by 37% over the past year. Marcus's personal transformation served as the program's most compelling testimonial. He had completed his bachelor's degree in social work, maintained 18 months of sobriety, and rebuilt his relationship with his daughter Sophie, who now accompanied him to speaking engagements during school breaks. His ex-wife Jennifer had remarked that Marcus was finally the man she'd married before his deployments to Afghanistan. Present, engaged, and committed to building rather than destroying. But perhaps the most touching aspect of Marcus's recovery was his relationship with Rex. The German Shepherd had essentially adopted the veteran as his permanent partner, displaying protective behaviors that extended far beyond professional duty. Rex slept beside Marcus's bed, accompanied him to therapy appointments, and seemed to sense PTSD episodes before Marcus himself recognized the warning signs. Their bond had become the template for therapeutic relationships between crisis response dogs and the veterans they served. As the conference presentation concluded, Marcus delivered his final message with the conviction of someone who had stared into the abyss and chosen to climb back toward the light. Every veteran in crisis represents not just a potential tragedy, but an opportunity for healing that can ripple outward to touch hundreds of lives. Rex taught me that sometimes the most powerful intervention isn't force or medication or lengthy. Therapy is simply the presence of another being who understands your pain and refuses to abandon you in your darkest moment. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes, but Marcus barely noticed the applause. His attention was focused on Rex, whose amber eyes reflected the same quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Together, they had transformed a moment of crisis into a movement of hope, proving that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships can generate the most profound changes. As delegates began approaching the stage with questions about implementing similar programs in their jurisdictions, Marcus smiled and scratched Rex behind the ears. Their war was far from over, but for the first time since returning from Afghanistan, they were fighting for something greater than survival. They were fighting for the belief that every warrior deserves a chance to come home, not just from foreign battlefields, but from the wars that rage within their own minds. Their story had become legend, but their mission was just beginning.